talking about opportunities and young faces. Avani Kapur joins us on the broadcast to lead accountability initiative CPR India. Avani can be reached at the rate Avani underscore Kapur, at the rate ACC initiative, and also at the rate CPR underscore India. Avani, thank you so much for speaking to us. Good to see you today. How are you?
Thanks, Pankaj. Nice to be here.
Great.
Exciting day. Budget day is always an exciting day.
It is. Trust me. I mean, and I can equally, reciprocate the idea. While the newsroom is buzzing, I can understand the industries, the corporate sector, all the government centers, MSMEs, SMEs, all of them are upbeat. How do you see it, Avni? Tell us, first of all, your initial reactions to the budget, whether it stood tall on your expectations or not. And later on, we would definitely come and understand from you what is Accountability Initiative CPR India. But first, your reactions on the budget.
So to be honest, I'm always measured when it's on vote on account. I don't really take the budget numbers that seriously because they are going to be changing in July.
Mhm.
For me, I think budgets generally give a sense of the priority of the government, and what is the kind of policy stance that the government is taking. And I think this budget seems to be following the stand that the government has been taking. I think there's been nearly a 3 times increase in capital expenditure since 2019-20.
Mhm.
And I think the path of growth has been focused on capital expenditure. As someone that's been working on the social sector, I think I guess it's always a toss-up. I think one of the things that I was hoping that the budget will address, not necessarily in terms of allocations, but definitely at least mention, is the rural distress. I think the hope that capital expenditure is a multiplier for growth. We're waiting to see the effect of that in rural areas, and was surprised that the allocations for Narega, for instance, have remained stagnant. We were looking at the numbers recently. Already 264 crore person days of work have already been generated under Narega, and we still have 2 months left in the fiscal year. In
Right.
fact, if we look at the expenditure, we've already spent more than even the revised estimates as well as the new budget announcements. But
Mhm.
um, I guess you have to do a balancing act, and I think the focus has been on a lot of the capital expenditure as opposed to some of the human development indicators, whether it's health,
Mhm.
nutrition, education.
Absolutely. I mean, also, a lot of emphasis has been put on the women workforce. So you yourself have been, working towards the upliftment and also keeping a close eye on the data and statistics. How do you see, for a country of 1.4 billion and half of the population being women, how best the resources can be harnessed, and how it can be put to best use? And I do believe that the government has been at its job when it comes to women empowerment.
I think I'm still traditional and old school, where I strongly believe that focusing on human capital formation and human development is going to be critical. Recently, the annual status of education report came out, and this time it was beyond basics, focusing a little bit on secondary education, adolescent care. I think the finance minister did talk about significant increase in women in higher education. But the numbers and government's own numbers talk about the fact that while in secondary education, I think women still lag behind significantly. I think the USR survey had this number of 24% female students in the age bracket of 14 to 18 could not read a grade 2 level text.
Mhm.
So I'm still old school. I think that the government has come up with some innovative schemes. There was that focus on LPG. There was a focus on trying to ensure that the new housing is directed towards women, at least the ownership. But I think that what's got missed out in the process is the
Mhm.
focus on maternal health, the focus on nutrition, and the focus on education. And those are really important for women as empowerment as well.
Mhm. Right. One critical aspect of the, may I ask which part of country you are in? Are you in Delhi? By
Delhi.
You're in.
Delhi. Yes.
When we talk about metropolitan cities, especially tier one cities, the emphasis or the media gamut that is based here at times refers to the urban side of the budget, but the rural aspect, if you travel to the hinterlands of Bihar, to Uttar Pradesh, to Maharashtra for that matter, to Gujarat to a certain extent, these are successful models of governance in the country, yet they leave a lot of scope of improvement. How do you see an interim budget or a general budget catering to that need, or is it more that is required to be done on the microcosmic level, at the grassroots level, or are we doing just fine?
Personally, I think, like I said, I think we need to focus. There is rural distress going on.
Mhm.
There was a big rise, and one of the metrics for it for us that we've been looking at is just like the rise and of demand for work in the
Mhm.
rural areas. I think COVID, Narega was a big safety net during COVID, and so of course you saw a big increase in demand,
Mhm.
and you see that. You would have imagined that post COVID, it would have fallen significantly, but it hasn't so.
Right.
So to me, that does raise some questions. At the
Mhm.
same time, wage rates have been pretty stagnant, and that's worrying. So in an ideal situation, you would imagine that if there was no rural distress, you would see a lot more productivity. You would see less demand for Narega. You would see greater large number of people still moving to urban areas,
Uh-huh.
and I think that the fact that Narega, which is of course one of the largest social security schemes of the
Mhm.
country and a great one at that, you still see a lot of demand, and yet both agricultural wages but also Narega wages haven't kept pace. So that does raise some question marks
Mhm.
for me. I think what the pandemic did was a focus on food security, which was definitely important. And you saw this big increase in PDS. And I think that was a great initiative that was taken. But
Mhm.
how do you ensure that you can't just be giving free food grain alone? You need to ensure that employment is productive. And how
Mhm.
do you ensure productive employment even in rural areas?
Right.
So I do think that more can always be done for rural areas. It will be different from what is required in urban areas, but I think we do need to address the rural distress.
Right. No, absolutely. Your views and your assessment is well respected, well received also. And Avni comes from Center for Policy Research, and it's a 50-year-old institution engaged in policy formation, guiding the government and the non-government sector, if I'm not wrong, in order to formulate their policies, how the impact goes deep down to the very last mile. Avni, one final question. You are the lead accountability initiative CPR, Center for Policy Research in India. If I may be very direct with you, your assessments with the hard work that you and your team put in, vis-a-vis the transformation of it on the ground level through the government policies. Do you see it more in a better, implementation in a better fashion now, or is it still a lot to be done to actually translate the findings into reality through governance?
So to be completely honest, I think often what is missing, and this is true for across governments, is
Mhm.
we don't actually know what's happening on the ground. When we started the accountability initiative, we started tracking the flow of money and looking at outputs and outcomes on the ground because that information, unfortunately, was
Mhm.
not publicly available and is still not publicly available. If you look at the MIS systems of a lot of the schemes, you can see that there is progress happening. A lot more money is flowing and it's flowing on time.
Mhm.
But the extent to which that's actually leading to outputs and outcomes, there aren't enough metrics for it. And so I think in my final pitch, it would be the government has been doing a great job of putting budgets online, both state governments and the union government. I wish we could have a lot more statistics and data online for
Mhm.
researchers like us to actually answer that question of how much of these policies are actually translating to welfare on the ground.
Mhm.
You hear anecdotal evidence, you have small surveys, but they'll never be enough in this country as scale as such as ours. So from our surveys, we see mixed results across schemes. Some schemes do well. I think the second we're doing things on very mission mode, simple tasks tend to be definitely more productive. But the second you're trying to transform the country, it requires actually having data to track that progress. So my pitch would be, let's have more data and discussion on what's happening on the ground.
Right.
For now, I think what we can say is, there's been transformation in terms of a lot more capital assets being built on the ground. To the extent to which they translate into actual outcome and employment remains to be seen.
Well, indeed, Avni, much respect to your work, to your team's work, to CPR's work here from our side, because why I asked this question was for a very simple reason. And nowadays it appears to be a cliche that there was a time when former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi had admitted that कि अगर केंद्र 100 रुपए भेजती है गांव के उत्थान के लिए तो सिर्फ 20 रुपए पहुंच पाते हैं, यानी 1 रुपए में से मात्र 20 पैसे, और बाद में बीच में गो बिटवीन्स और बिचौले के बीच में वो रह जाता है. But this government has made it a point and they have quoted this incident saying कि अब डायरेक्ट बेनिफिट ट्रांसफर और कई ऐसे इनिशिएटिव से जो सरकार के जो अच्छे काम है, जो उनकी पॉलिसीज है, उनका फायदा अब सीधे लोगों तक पहुंचता है. That's why you are the bridge in between. You are the ones who actually tells the government, the eyes and ears of the government, that hey, look, these are the numbers, these are the figures, and these are the issues. And hence my question emanated that how positive has it been since the time we have seen previous governments performing. Avni, thank you so much. One final question. I can't let you go before that. You told us in the beginning that you don't trust budget numbers. Fine. But from a populist budget to, I wouldn't say political, but how should I say it? A political, a budget, do you see it as a populist one, or do you see it as an okay budget one, if I may ask?
So one clarification: I trust budget numbers. I don't take the interim budget numbers that seriously, because as I think the finance minister also said, this is a vote on account. I think what was interesting for me was that there were no big policy announcements, and that makes sense because it is an interim budget. So I have no problems with the fact that there was no big. I think last election year, PM Kisan was announced. This year, you didn't have the same populist announcements.
Right.
And so I think it was more of a budget just trying to bring together some of what it has been trying to do. So the focus on trying to create a reform economy, it did mention all the DBT measures that it's doing, and the focus on capital expenditure. So for me, it's pretty much a synthesis of some of what they have been, the policy direction that the government has been taking, rather than necessarily very big bang policy announcements.
Still, I'll take it as a thumbs up. Lovely. Nice speaking to you. Thank you so much. We let you go as of now and have a very blessed and a nice evening, but only with a promise to sit down with you once again once the general budget are due after the elections, and maybe before that as well, to discuss several policy leads that you and your team so deftly put out.
Thank you so much, Pankaj, and good luck to you for the rest of the show as well. Thank you,
Avani. Avani Kapur there, lead accountability initiative CPR India. She could be reached at the rate Avani_Kapur. Thank you so much.